Hey everybody, welcome to Grounded Moments. In this four-part series that we're starting today, I am going to be talking primarily to parents and to leaders about the importance of navigating our own pain to allow us to really be present, engaged, and open with other people and some of the challenges that come up with that. This particular video is really going to be exploring how we identify pain, what we're talking about, the ways that it gets us stuck. The second video will be about the first shift that we can make. The second video will be about a second shift that I'd like to see us make. And then the fourth video is going to be about how to actually go about making those shifts. And so let's just jump in together today. One of the things that often happens when I start to talk with people about pain is there almost starts to be a bit of a panic of like, why are we talking about pain? Won't that mean that we get stuck in our pain? And I just want to acknowledge that while I understand the fear that we would have about slowing down in our pain, what I actually find is that instead of getting stuck there, when we are able to slow down and look at it and name it, it actually opens us up to moving forward in ways that we did not have access to before. So my whole goal with this series, with all of the grounded moments that we do, is that by slowing down, we actually find ourselves able to re-engage and to move forward. So let's talk a little bit about pain today. We're going to go a couple different directions. The first one, I want to acknowledge the top layer of pain that I think is often the language that we're using a lot of presently. And then we're going to actually go into a deeper understanding of what that top layer reflects and what it means. And I think culture right now, the top layer of pain that I'm seeing and I'm hearing people talk a lot about is grief and anxiety. Right? Grief has to do with pain about loss of just about any kind, and there is a lot of it happening. Right? Loss of future, loss of dreams, loss of present moments, loss of access to people, loss of relationships, loss of jobs, loss of stability. There's a lot of loss that's happening currently that we're engaging with and we're dealing with. And when we experience loss, the pain that comes with that is an element of grief, and there's a lot of different kinds and a lot of different ways of doing that. The other top layer of pain that I'm seeing is this anxiety. And oftentimes anxiety is when we have a sense of, I need to do something about it, but I don't have any control or any ability to actually do anything about it. So for some people, they'll even describe this as feeling all of the weight of responsibility with none of the power. And there's this in-between space of going, I need to control what I can't control. And that really drives and spins anxiety. Anxiety is often rooted in a bit of an unsettling, an absence of safety and security, that we're trying to ground ourselves, we're trying to get ourselves to be secure. So grief and anxiety are really this top layer of pain that we're seeing. But really what I want to draw our attention to is the underneath that top layer of pain is actually the meaning that we make of pain, and what I'm going to call our primary emotional experience, our primary pain. And ultimately, whether we're grieving, whether we're anxious, whatever this top layer of pain that's happening around us, the internal experience, this deeper experience, typically goes in two directions. One, when I experience pain, I experience it in a way that it says something about me, right? It challenges my identity. It will sound something like, I'm not good enough, I don't cut it, I have nothing to offer, I don't deserve to be here, I'm a failure, I don't have any value, I'm worthless, right? This language that will come that really, I experience this pain, whether it's loss or absence of control or things that are going on around me, I end up in this place where I just feel I don't have value. I'm not special. I'm not important. I'm alone in this. Nobody cares about me. I'm not even worth being loved. I'm not loved. This kind of pain that is a very internal pain. Right? The second experience of this deeper pain, whether it's grief, anxiety, or any other top layer pain, we have the internal, says what it says about me, but there's also this external experience that may show up for some of us that is about the things that I'm experiencing seem to say something about the relationships I'm in, the world around me. It sounds like I can't trust people. I'm in this on my own. No one has my back. I feel rejected. I'm abandoned. I'm powerless. I can't do anything about this. That I'm not safe in this. That you don't trust me, and there's this external kind of between us experience that's where the pain sits. That's where we settle into it and really get activated by it. So when we're thinking about being leaders and being parents who are in moments where we're dealing with our own experiences of pain, I want us not just to look at, am I grieving? Am I anxious? What's the expression of my pain? What's kind of that top layer? But I want us to take it a step deeper and sit and go, does the pain that I'm experiencing right now, is it a pain that feels like it says something about me? Right, where my identity, who I am, my value seems to be questioned, or I feel like I've lost it, or I have no sense of self and I'm floating in this worthlessness of nothingness? Or does it feel like it says something about relationships in the world around me? Or does it feel like people aren't trustworthy, that I can't believe anything that I hear and I need to do all the work myself? And begin to pay attention to what direction does that pain draw us. And some of us will find that we actually get pulled a little bit in both directions. Right? Some of us, we just get flooded into that internal experience. Some of us get flooded by the external. Some of us actually straddle and do a little bit of both. And so as we notice what direction does that pain go, it allows us to also be attentive to how we're reacting to that pain. I'll use language of coping. Right? When I'm in pain, I'm going to do something to cope with that pain. And what we find is when we're dealing and experiencing internal type pain, right? Pain that says I'm worthless, that I don't have value, or that I'm not good enough, that I'm not loved, that I'm not cared about, right? This internal, I'm a failure, I don't deserve anything. That typically when we're experiencing internal pain, we tend to cope with that and we tend to react out of that by either beating the crap out of ourselves or pushing against other people. So this sounds like shame of myself. I'm worthless. We'll just spiral. Those of us who are prone to shame can probably already tell you what that internal spiral is, where we just beat ourselves up. Right? So if it's an internal pain, I will shame myself, or I will blame somebody else for it. Say, I feel this way, this is their fault, and they're lying to me, and I will put all that blame. It'll come off maybe passive-aggressively. Some people do this in really subtle ways, where we just kind of shift the blame to other people so that I don't have to feel bad about the way that my identity feels fractured right now, that I will put it on you. So that when the pain is internal, I tend to cope with that by either shaming myself or blaming somebody else, right? Now, when the pain is this external, relational, in-between us place, in those moments, it actually has a lot more to do with this safety experience, right? I don't feel safe in the world. I don't feel safe in relationship with you. I don't know if I can trust you. There's this unsettling. And in moments when this pain is this external, relational, between us pain, we typically respond in one of two ways. One is we will control things. We will lean in and take over and jump in and fix things. This is where we'll go, I'm going to do it. No one else is going to do it. I got to do it on my own. I got to fix this all. We start telling other people what to do. We really jump in with control. Or the other response that we'll do to this external relational pain is we'll just try to escape, right? We'll drop things, go like, fine, I can't trust you. You just do it yourself. You don't trust me, you do it. And we back off and we escape, and maybe we find ourselves daydreaming about other ways that we would do it and what other worlds we would live in where things wouldn't be the way that they are. And we just escape. We just bail. We just drop things and we run. And so when there is this external pain, we typically will go either lean in and take more control, or we will just bail and escape. I don't feel safe enough in this world. Let me just get out of it altogether. So we can see that internal and external pain sound different, feel different. They also have different ways of reacting to that. And so what I want us to do right now, I want to invite you to actually slow down with me for a moment. Right? Let's take a minute together. And I want you, maybe it's hard to identify, okay, what's the actual pain point? We can actually just start with, what are we doing? When we're finding ourselves reactive, am I doing more blaming of other people and shaming myself? Am I doing more leaning in and taking control, or just kind of bailing out of things and escaping and disconnecting and disappearing? That which of those directions do I tend to lean? And again, some of us may lean a little bit of both ways, but I want us to pay attention in those leanings. If we're in this shame, blame spot, that's going to tell us that there's an internal pain that we're experiencing, something that we're getting these messages and having these experiences about us, something about our value or our worth or our capacity or our adequacy to do things. And I want you to see if you can even just put your finger on what's the language around that pain that you're experiencing for yourself. And if you find yourself doing more of the control or escape behaviors, that's going to say that the pain is sitting more in the relationships around you or around you in the world, in your relationship to the world. And I want you to see if you can just kind of put your finger on what's that unsettlingness? What is it that feels unsafe? Is it unreliability of others? Is it you can't trust people? Is it it's going to come back to bite you? Is it you feel powerless? There's a lot of different ways of thinking about that. So I want to see if you can just put your finger on that. Because as we move into the next videos and the next part of this series, we're going to look at actually how to shift if we're in this place of internal pain and experience. What's the shift that we're going to need to navigate in that? And if we're dealing with external pain and external things, what's the shift that we're going to need to navigate in that? And then we're going to actually talk about how to make that shift happen. But we can't get to any of those if we don't have a little bit of an idea of what's the deeper layer of pain that we're experiencing and how is that manifesting and what is that looking like. So I hope you've tracked with me this far. If there's things that you need more clarifying, feel free to comment on the videos, either on my YouTube channel, Brian James McMahon, or on any of the social media posts. You can go right to my website, recenterkc.org. Feel free to put questions and comments on things that don't make sense or you want to hear a little bit more about. But I hope you'll continue with me in this journey as we really identify the way to make shifts, what shifts we need to make, and the significance of that. Because what I want to talk about for a few minutes right now is the first shift that we as pastors, leaders, parents need to be attentive to practicing. And this is a shift that primarily has to do with moments when we experience internal pain. It applies also to external pain, but I really want to highlight when we have moments when we are internally crushed, right? Our pain pulls on things of worthlessness, of inadequacy, of not measuring up, of not being good enough, and we cope with that pain, blaming others or shaming others. What we really end up losing is any capacity for empathy. Because we know that reactivity and empathy are mutually exclusive. I cannot both be reacting to my pain and present and attentive and experiencing and looking into your world at the same time. I have to pick one. So for us to be attentive to moments when we are in pain, so that we can then actually shift from a place of reactivity to a place of empathy. And when I talk about empathy, I mean our capacity to see someone else's experience. Whether or not we agree with that experience, whether or not we think that experience is valid, whether or not we're having that experience ourselves, that the relevancy, our own perspective on it, those are not relevant. What empathy means is I can understand how you're experiencing this. I can see how this moment is impacting you this way. Right? With kids, with people that we lead, there are a lot of moments when they're having reactions, experiences that I might even feel are a bit nuts. Like, why I would not respond that way. I don't feel that way. This doesn't make any sense to me. And if I get stuck in my own pain, I will miss out on an opportunity to actually connect with them and help either my children, to help the people around me to walk out of their own pain. So this first shift that I really want us to be attentive to is the shift from a place of reactivity to a place of empathy where I can see someone else's experience. Because empathy is what opens us up to connection. And right now, in our current era of time, we need connection. I think this is true all of the time, but we're living in a world right now where there are significant deficits of connection, significant deficits of people available to be connected with. And if we have an influencing role in someone's life, if we are a leader, if we are a pastor, if we are a parent, it is really important for us to be available to others as a source of connection. And we won't be available if we aren't able to be empathetic, to see their experience. And we won't be able to be empathetic if we're living in a place of reactivity. So the first thing that we have to do is notice, what is our level of reactivity? Am I shaming myself? Am I beating myself up? Am I spinning? Am I being passive aggressive, which is kind of that pushing other people away? I can be passive aggressive to others. I can be passive aggressive to ourselves. So we're starting by noticing, am I dealing with internal pain, which is causing this reactivity in me? I need to be able to identify that. I need to be able to shift out of that from a place of reactivity to a place of empathy, to open myself up to see someone else's experience so that I can lean into that experience, so that together in a place of connection, we can walk out of or be in together whatever that moment is. So I'm going to pause here real quick, and I actually want you to take a moment and breathe. I want you to settle for a moment, and I want you to think about the interactions that you've been having in your life today, this week. Are there places and moments that you found yourself having a bit of difficulty getting into the experience of somebody else, of really understanding why they're experiencing what they're doing? Or maybe you're able to understand it, but it flips you out and you're mad about it, and you have a hard time being patient with them in their experience. Right? If that's happening for us, that's reflective that we're having a bit of trouble getting out of reactivity and into empathy, which is really inhibiting our connection. So I'm going to talk a bit in the fourth video about how to make that shift. But I want us to pay attention. If you're a parent, a pastor, a leader, I want you to log in your mind that when we are experiencing pain, we're going to need to be really intentional to be practicing shifting from a place of reactivity to a place of empathy. In this third part, I want to talk about the second shift that I think is really important for us, and that's the shift from survival to empowerment. Right? That one of the things that pain does for us, when we're in a place of pain, we're experiencing something, particularly when it's the type of pain that feels like it's around me, that it's impacting my relationship with other people. I don't trust you. I don't feel safe with you. I feel like the world is collapsing around me. I don't feel like I have any sort of power or agency to do anything about it. I feel like I'm being betrayed. I'm being abandoned or rejected in this place. Right? So you can feel the relational external dynamic of that particular pain. And one of the things that happens when we experience that pain is it almost trips us up into survival mode. Right? Survival mode has to do with, I need to protect myself. I don't feel safe. Right? And the response to not feeling safe is actually to double down on what we know how to do. Right? What we know about the brain is that the brain will always choose what is familiar, even if what is familiar isn't actually helpful, isn't actually producing growth, isn't benefiting others. Even if what is familiar causes more disconnection, our brains are set up to choose familiar because it feels safer. So when we are in pain, and typically if it's this external safety, relational-oriented pain, my familiar responses are going to be either like, let me take over and do it all for myself so that I can control everything and make sure it all goes the way I want it to go, or nothing's safe, I'm not in control of anything, let me bail, let me get out. That those are the familiar ways of coping with the pain of safety and of an unsafe world and of disorientation in that place. And as we're conscious of pain, we can actually slow down and change our process so that we don't end up doubling down on coping skills that actually aren't helpful. They're just really familiar to us. Right now, the process, the shift that we're talking about of shifting from survival to empowerment, one of the things that will be a required part of this, and part of what makes this shift so difficult, is shifting from survival to empowerment is a shift from I can't do everything to I can do something. But that shift also requires us to let go of being able to do everything. That in empowerment to do something, this opens us up to innovation, this opens us up to creativity, but it also holds the possibility of losing the familiar and losing what we've known. So as we begin recognizing the pain that we get stuck in, our propensity to double down on either control or just bail out escape behaviors, if we want to begin this shift toward a place of, yeah, I can't do it all, I'm not in control of everything, but I can do something. I can make a choice that there's a next step in front of me that will open me up to the next step. That actually that empowerment, that sense of being able to do a small thing, sets us up to innovate, to create, to do other things. But it also carries with it the need to grieve and the possibility of loss, in the pain that is present. So we want to be attentive to this, that we know that when we're in pain, we're not creative. When we're in pain, it pulls us into this survival space where we double down on what we know. And so I want you to pause for a moment. I want you just to think about your day. I want you to think about your week. Have you had those moments where you feel like your wheels are spinning but you're not going anywhere? Have you had those moments, maybe things you've been trying, where you feel like you're trying so hard and it's just not working out? Right? Our survival instinct says try harder, do more, go. The shifting toward empowerment is actually going to require us to slow down for a minute, to accept I can't do everything. I can do something. What's my part? What's not my part? Setting aside the things that aren't mine to do, even though it's going to pull on it. Maybe I won't survive if I don't do it all and I can't trust other people. It's not my part to do. I have a part. I have a role. I have things that I am able to do. And I need to lean into this, because when I can lean into the things that I can do, I actually get back in touch with my own sense of empowerment, which reopens me to creativity, into innovation, into engagement with those around us. We become much better leaders when we're in that place. So in the next video, we're going to talk specifically about how to navigate these shifts. But I want you just to begin building your attentiveness to the places that you find yourself just sucked into go mode, where you're spinning, where you're trying harder, you're controlling more. And it's a lot harder to be creative, because we're going to need to shift. That's cueing us in that we're in survival mode. And we're going to need to shift out of that. We're going to need to let go of some things, and we're going to need to try some smaller steps to take. So if you've been with me through this whole journey and have been able to identify what your pain experience is, whether it's more internally oriented, that the experiences say something about you, or the more externally oriented, it feels like it says something about the safety and trustworthiness of the relationships around you, and you can actually have some language for that. And you've begun to open your mind a little bit to this recognition that we need to be able to shift from a place of reactivity to a place of empathy, which opens us to connection, and to shift from a place of survival mode to a place of empowerment, that I can make choices and there's things that I can do. And so we're recognizing that those are the shifts that we need to be able to make if we're going to be good leaders and if we're going to be good parents. And in order to make those shifts, there's 4 steps that I'm going to walk us through today about what to do. We're going to talk about owning your pain. We're going to talk about recognizing what you do to cope with your pain. We're going to talk about grounding yourself in something bigger, so finding something bigger, and we're going to explore that and talk about what that means. And then we're going to talk about the 4th thing, which is living out of that something bigger. So we're going to walk through all 4 of those things today. So stick around with me. I think this will be really helpful for you. So the first step in actually getting out of pain is being able to own your pain. We have to be able to name it. We have to be able to talk about it. I tell my clients all the time, if I don't know the task at hand, if I don't know the project we're working with, how in the world are we going to know which tools are the right tools? Right? If I'm rebuilding something in my yard, I use very different tools than if I'm building something inside my house. And using a rake inside my house, not going to be all that helpful. But I need to know what it is that we're dealing with. You need to know what it is that you're dealing with in order to be able to move forward. So I unpack this a lot more in the first video. So if you haven't watched it, go back and watch that. We're really looking at how do you put language on your pain, either the internal experience of it having something to do with your identity or the external experience of it having something to do with safety and relationship. The first step that we need to do is to be able to own it and name it and see it. And when we do, we recognize it for ourselves. We also share it with others. This is beginning to move us towards some connection and intimacy and openness to others by being able to share with others the pain that we're experiencing. So if you don't have language for your pain yet, I want you to go back and watch video 1 and see if that'll help you get a little bit of language for it. If you have some language, we're going to be ready to then move to the next step. So step 2 is being able to recognize what we're doing to cope with our pain. Right? We talked about in video 1 that when we have predominantly internal identity-oriented experience with pain, we tend to cope with that by shaming ourselves and just beating ourselves silly, or we blame others and we get really reactive against others and shifting the blame to them and being really critical and really snarky. And if we have more externally oriented pain, right, it feels like untrustworthy, not safe, people aren't reliable, bad stuff's going to happen, I'm uneasy. We tend to cope with that pain by either taking control and leaning in and performing and taking over, or we go completely the other direction and we back out, we escape, we give up. So the second step in navigating through this pain is being able to recognize what you do to cope. Now, I want to clarify something, that not all of our coping behaviors look bad. Right? Actually, there are many of our coping behaviors that look helpful, right? We're trying harder, we're digging in deeper, we're taking over projects that would otherwise fail. Parents trying harder to control their families can look really good. And please don't hear me to say that stop trying. No, what I'm looking at is when we are in pain, whatever we do from that place of pain actually will only cause disconnection. It will help us survive. Right? We've learned many of these coping skills at some point in our lives that allowed us to survive or allowed us to move forward, but they aren't helpful when it comes to building a relationship. So when we're thinking about being parents and pastors and leaders, needing to be open to connecting with others, we have to be attentive to the ways that we cope with our pain. In our minds are helpful, but from a relational standpoint, they actually cause disconnection. Right? I might have critiques to offer people that would help them along their way. If I'm doing that from a place of connection and groundedness, that's very helpful. If I'm doing that because I'm feeling out of control and I'm feeling in pain, that does not come across the same way. So we're needing to be attentive to the first step is we need to own our pain. The second step is being able to look at what do we tend to do when we're in that pain? Do we shame? Do we blame? Do we take control? Do we bail and escape and leave people hanging? What is it that we do to cope, right? So for me, my first step, the pain that jacks me up every single time is when something, the world, someone, the situation feels unfair. That's the language I put on it. It feels unfair. When I feel powerless to do anything about it, I say, this is unfair, can't do a thing, I'm screwed. Because then where that leads me is going, I failed. I'm a failure. I should have preemptively known what to do. I should have done something to not be in this situation. I have failed. So my first step is being able to own, this is the pain that I'm experiencing. This is how I name it, unfair, powerless, failure. That's my pain. I have to own it. The second step is being able to really recognize what I do in my pain. And for me, there's really 3 primary things that I do. 1, I get angry, but it looks at like a lot of different levels, anything from internal anger to passive aggressive to like indignant, and now I'm pissed off, right? I get angry. I actually get really manipulative, which looks like control and empowerment if I'm grounded in a good place, but I'm doing it for myself. I'm trying to like I end up over-involving myself, I end up micromanaging things, I take over in this manipulative way that seems like it's for others' benefit, but actually I'm just doing it for myself. Or the third thing that I do is I will bail, I will escape, I will drift off into fantasy land and think about better jobs and better people and better families and where do I want to be that's not here because that all seems better, and I will just escape into some other place. Right? So that's my first step, and that's my second step. We've got to have language for it. Language doesn't change us, but language sets us up to be able to walk into some changes. Okay? So that's the first step and the second step. The third step is we have to find something bigger than our pain. This step is a big deal. We can swim in pain all the time. We will be drowning in pain if we cannot find something bigger that is going to ground us, that is going to center us. There's a lot of different ways to describe it, right? We can talk about finding our core selves. We can find identifying something bigger that's outside of the pain that can ground us, becoming grounded, becoming centered, settling. There's a lot of different language we can use. But what we're talking about is we need something that feels as big as the pain. Right? When I feel like the world is unfair, man, that feels enormous. And saying something like, you're a nice guy, maybe it's true, but it doesn't hold water next to that pain of life is unfair. I don't care if I'm a good, nice guy. Life is unfair and I feel powerless and I feel like a failure. Don't you go tell me I'm a nice guy. I need a truth. I need something that grounds me, that is equally as strong and equally as powerful as the pain that I'm feeling. In the process of finding those grounding, bigger truths, core self, this is a bit of a journey that we're going to have to go on. This is a place I often recommend getting resources, getting help. Find a therapist. Let them help you navigate through this because it can be hard. It actually took me quite a while to land. I had to try different truths on and go, I think this is the bigger one. And then I got in pain and I'm like, no, this doesn't mean anything and it didn't work. And then I'm mad and go, yeah, because this wasn't actually bigger and I thought it was bigger. So we're looking for something that's bigger. And really, there's three sources for where we're going to find a bigger truth, a bigger experience, a bigger reality than our pain. Other people's voices in our lives, our own inner voice, or our spiritual source. Right? Other people say things about us. We have internal things that we know are true about us. We have a spiritual source that speaks things over us. And the journey of finding what that bigger truth is, this is very, very personal. There are no two people whose pain looks exactly the same. And therefore, there's no two people whose bigger truths are going to look exactly the same. Sometimes we might have some overlap, but they're going to be really, really specific. Right? So for me, I guess I'll give you an example. The truths, this bigger truth, right? This something deeper for me than the pain. When I feel that things are unfair, I'm powerless, and I'm a failure because I should have known it, should have seen it coming, I should have done something. And I get angry, and I manipulate, micromanage, and I escape. The truth that I have to grab a hold of that is bigger than this is, one, all my feelings are valid. This is important for me. I spent a lot of time having my feelings invalidated, going like, it doesn't make sense. Why would you feel that way? Just turn off your feelings. And I actually have to stop and tell my feelings, okay, you're valid. You might not be helpful. You might not get me anywhere, but you're valid. Like you get to exist because life can be hard, and actually that does look really unfair. And you actually kind of are in a powerless position. So let me just validate you for a moment that you're not crazy. What you're feeling makes sense. So I have to validate this. So that's actually the first really big thing for me, is what I'm experiencing is valid. The second thing is I do have to remind myself that I am good enough. And that enough word is key for me. Not I'm a good guy, because I can actually give you some pretty clear examples of moments when maybe I haven't been good, or haven't been a good husband, or haven't been a good pastor, or haven't been a good therapist. I can give you those moments. And so the truth for me is that I am good enough. I'm a good enough husband to open myself to connection. I'm a good enough therapist. I'm a good enough pastor. I'm a good enough man. I'm good enough. And then the third truth for me that sits bigger is the truth that I'm brave. That even when things are unfair, even when I feel powerless, I'm still at my core an incredibly brave person. I can look back in moments when I could have run, when I could have left, when I could have not done hard things. And at my core, I know that I am a brave person. Now, those are my truths, and from the position of having those truths, it actually sounds, oh, yeah, like, okay, we can do this. I'm telling you, finding those truths is hard. Right? And I actually want to do something with you for a moment to see if I can actually help you get in touch with some of these deeper truths that you have for yourself that you might be looking for. And I want you, even just where you are, take a deep breath, settle back in your chair, take a deep breath, and I want you to imagine, I want you just to think about like a moment or a situation or a place or something you did that you were like, this was like the best version of me. This was my kick-ass self. This was the fullness of me, right? Pulled back from any restraints. Maybe you went on a trip somewhere. Maybe you came through for someone. Maybe you set a goal and you overcame it and you climbed a mountain and you're on the top and you're having this experience of yourself of going, that's me at my best. I want you to pause for a moment and allow yourself to be drawn to this memory, to this place that is you at your best. This is your best self. This is you on your best day. All of your strengths and attributes on display. And I want you just to examine it, to look at it in your mind's eye, to notice what it felt like for you to be in that moment, to notice what posture you were standing or sitting with and how you were engaging the world and the people you were with in that moment. I want you to just watch that scene for a minute. And as you do, I almost want you to imagine that out of this scene pops a couple word bubbles. Just kind of float to the surface, that these are word bubbles that looking at the scene, these are words that capture the core of who you were in that moment. Right? Maybe for you that's the experience of being an overcomer and you overcame something. Maybe that's a moment for you where you just knew you were so deeply loved or chosen or cared about. Maybe it's a moment when you face something hard and you were able to make a choice. And this truth about you is that you're able to make choices. I want you to watch that scene and allow, what does this scene say about who you are at your very core of your being? I want you to watch that and just allow that to come up. And then I want you to almost imagine that you're sitting there in your room, and you in your chair, you can almost kind of put yourself in that bad day, right? That pain place. For me, it's unfair, powerless, failure. And I can just feel it, and it gets in my body, and I just start to do this. Just kind of put yourself in that place. And I want you to imagine you're in your pain, and sitting next to you was this your best self on your best day. And I almost want you to imagine if your best self was able to show up in a moment when you were deep and mired in your pain. And your best self wanted to remind you, not of something flippant, not of something light of going, hey, you'll get through this, you'll be all right, you're a good guy. Not something trite, not something informational. But if that best self was to call you back to who that part of you knew you to be, in that moment when you overcame that situation, in that moment that you imagined just a bit ago, if your best self could call you back and say, hey, remember this about you. Remember how loved and cared about you are. Remember how special you are and how much you have to offer. And remember how much courage you're able to lean into. Hey, remember, God's got your back. Remember, what is it that your best self would invite you to remember? And now we're getting closer to something bigger and something deeper that we can grab a hold of when we're in the midst of our pain. Because that's going to be that third step, is finding that something bigger. The fourth step is the simplest of all steps. When we are able to own our pain, when we're able to acknowledge what it is that we do to cope with that pain in a way that causes disconnection, when we're able to find something bigger and deeper, a grander truth, something more core to our own being than even the pain, we can do that. Now we get to say, what would that person do? What would that guy do? What would that gal do? What? That best self, me grounded in that truth. And I can tell you this. So I sit and go, I feel unfair. I feel powerless. I feel like I'm failing. I get angry in a variety of ways. I get manipulative and I escape. The truth about me, this bigger, deeper truth at the core of who I am, is that my feelings are valid. I don't got to pretend them away. I'm good enough, and I'm a brave person. And because I'm valid, I'm good enough, and I'm brave. What is it that guy does? And I'll tell you, when I'm grounded in those truths of who I am, I care for other people well, and I get really curious. And so when we're able to make that shift into being grounded in who we are, typically we're going to find ourselves doing one of a couple of things. I want to draw your attention to it. In that fourth step of doing something different, that something different is going to typically look like leaning into relationship and opening ourselves up with vulnerability. It's going to be a bit of a risk. We're going to lean in. We're going to try some. You can't do that when you're in pain. So when you're able to make that shift, this is going to lean in and be open and be vulnerable. We're going to lean in with empathy and curiosity. We're going to actually want to know what the other person's experience is. We're going to nurture others. And we're going to value ourselves. That in some combination of those things, those are typically the behaviors. When we're grounded and we're able to lean into connection, we're empathetic, we're vulnerable, we care about other people, and we value ourselves, and are able to hold all of those in the same place. So I hope walking through this has been helpful, just to give you an idea of what the process is of getting out of pain. If you have questions, I'd love to be helpful. You can contact me through my website. Some of us may be able to navigate this journey through pain ourselves. Some of us might need a little help. There is nothing wrong with that. I benefited from a ton of help on my own journey, figuring out how do I navigate through pain. And now I get to practice it. But sometimes getting to that place of being ready to practice it can need a little bit of help. So listen to these videos a few times, get them into you, practice them, be kind to yourself. Let's be people who are aware of the pain we're in so that we can navigate through that pain to remain open and available to care for and to lead and to parent the people who are in our world. Take care.